Last year, I ended up in hospital with a sinus infection. Now that might sound minor, but for me, it was anything but. Because of my history of cancer in my eye and heart failure, my body reacted in a way that shocked the doctors. Today, I'm sharing with you what happened. 5 days before, I was perfectly fine, taking out the recycling and getting on with life. I had no idea what was to come. It wasn't good. But how was the food? Hello you. Last year I went from what felt like a bad cold to being admitted to hospital for a week on IV antibiotics. I filmed some small bits at a time, but to be honest, I really wasn't well. So this is mostly me now talking you through what happened. I'll show you the single room, the ward, and the food. And I'll talk about the fun of having sleep apnea on a 12-bed ward. Fun times.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
At the start, I genuinely felt I had a bad cold. Well, I am feeling very ill right now. I'm absolutely full of cold. I keep coughing again. 2 days later, I'm in bed and you can probably tell something isn't right. A quick update on my cold. It's got progressively worse, unfortunately, and has led to an infection. Yay.
You're a very lucky man.
This time, it's an infection of my sinuses, my eye socket, my ear, which is absolutely killing me, and my throat as well, which is all raised and red. I went to the urgent care centre at the local hospital and the doctor had a look at my throat and immediately said, yeah, that's very red and swollen, and then had a look in my bad ear and pulled a face like, yeah, that's very red, and that's why it's absolutely killing right now. But I do have some antibiotics, and I've got an antibiotic spray, which is also a steroid and antiseptic too, so I'll see how that gets on and hopefully it clears up. Otherwise I'll be back to the GP this time. It's late and I'm going to go to bed. I thought I'd just update with a random video. Not quite sure why I'm putting it. Something to do to try and take my mind off it more. Before that clip, I'd already been to Skegness urgent care because my ear was absolutely killing me. It was the kind of pain where you just can't think straight.
I can't think straight right now.
At the time, I thought it was just a standard infection. They gave me tablets and an ear spray. I was hoping that was it and it would just pass. Unfortunately, I was very wrong. It didn't pass. I got worse. Much worse.
Here we go again.
The antibiotics they gave me at Skegness just weren't enough. By the next day, my eye socket had started to swell. A lot. And the pain in my head was unlike anything I've had before. I went back to the hospital, this time to the Pilgrim Hospital in Boston, first to urgent care, and then they sent me straight through to A&E. They didn't mess about once they saw me. They did a CT scan and some blood tests, and the results were a massive shock. My CRP level, which is a marker for infection and inflammation, was 218. Normal is below 0.9, with the high boundary being about 5 to 10, depending on the lab. My level was 44 times higher. Anything above 50 is considered severe. I think I had the winning score at 218.
Yeah, no, the winner gets an iPad.
When they got that result, they gave me immediate IV antibiotics and painkillers.
Have some congratulatory drugs.
Well, if that's your custom.
The CT scan confirmed that the infection had moved into my eye socket, although it was pretty obvious, since my eye socket was now raised instead of the curved dip you can see now. Because of my history of cancer in that same eye, and my bad heart condition, they decided I needed to be transferred immediately to Lincoln County Hospital for specialist care. So yeah, that explains a lot.
Is he sick?
No, darling.
I think I might have made a small mistake here though.
Oh God, here we go again.
Once they said Lincoln Hospital was expecting me, I went home to pack some things because I had a very strong feeling they were going to keep me in. I only took about 15 minutes at home, but by the time we got there, I got the impression they thought I wasn't coming. Maybe they didn't realise just how far I had to travel from near Boston to Lincoln. Either way, the wait in A&E that night was a long and painful one. It was 12:36 a.m. and I was still in the waiting room. Unfortunately, the IV line they put in Boston had to be removed before I left. My veins are what the nurses call difficult access, and because of all the chemotherapy I've had in the past, getting a new line in is always a nightmare. Lincoln was no different. By about 2 a.m. I was told the IV line would be in soon. Finally, at nearly 4 a.m. in the morning, I was allocated a bed. I actually got lucky and was allocated a side room on my own, which was exactly what I needed at that point. By about 4:15 a.m, everything was done. The nurses had finished sorting me out and I was allowed to sleep. I was absolutely exhausted. Even with all that pain in my face, I just went to sleep. Unfortunately, Hospital mornings start early. I was woken up at about 6 a.m. for antibiotics. Someone though had clearly been into the room while I was out cold to leave a meal order form and some water for me, and I didn't even notice a thing. At the time they weren't sure if I needed an operation to help drain my eye socket, so I'd been nil by mouth. It was 8:54 when the doctor told me that wasn't happening, so I could finally eat. And luckily, I don't mind a hospital breakfast. Rice Krispies with sugar, a slice of toast, and a cup of tea. After being nil by mouth and worrying about surgery, toast felt like a 5-course meal. After, I had to look at the menu for the day. Now, the hospital calls the meals lunch and supper, but for me, it's always breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Let me know in the comments what you call it and where you're from. And just to be clear, tea in my book is a drink and not a meal. The hospital staff bring you this little tick box menu like you're on a budget airline. It's the only restaurant I've been to that you order 8 hours in advance and hope for the best. Dinner, or as they call it supper, was actually alright. On the menu you could choose from leek and potato soup, cottage pie, roast turkey, 3-bean chili, or just a plain cheese and ham sandwich if you couldn't be bothered, or didn't fancy anything else. There are puddings on the menu too, but I'm not really a pudding person.
No dessert, sir.
Or as I often call it, dessert. I normally just want a decent main meal. Here's a little look out the window at my view. It has a little garden area, but it could do with some love, although it could be worse. And here's me sat in the chair looking absolutely miserable. That swelling you see in my eye socket, that's really not normal. The pain was absolutely unreal and I felt really ill. But I did get lucky with the side room though, because the state my head was in and all the pain, I just couldn't deal with all that noise from the ward. A knife and fork on the table, a pre-warning that your lunch is on the way. While I waited for lunch, I had a quick go on the hospital's word search. The fish and rice might not look like much, but it was actually rather tasty and was enough for me while I was feeling as bad as I was. This is a little sample of tomorrow's menu. For lunch there's a choice of beef casserole, chicken korma, plain omelette or cottage cheese. I chose the chicken korma. A potential risk because sometimes they can make it spicy even when it's not meant to be.
It's hot, 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 hot.
I had some visitors today and in fact throughout my stay in hospital. It was really nice seeing my partner and family during the day. Apart from that, it was mainly a blur of IV antibiotics and pain relief. My day ended at 9:30 p.m. with the last round of antibiotics and I was ready for a much needed decent sleep. On to the next day, and breakfast was the same as yesterday, and it would be throughout my stay. Here's the korma I had for lunch. It was okay, not the best korma I've had, and it was potentially risky on a stomach with all those antibiotics I've been having. But for hospital food, it was decent. And I also came into the jackpot. They very kindly fulfilled my special request of an orange. My partner visited again today, and to my amazement, brought a very special gift. A cake! And no ordinary cake. It was chocolate coffee cake, my absolute favourite. Dinner, or the evening meal, also known as tea to avoid confusion, was a sandwich also served with crackers and cheese I asked for. Now I wasn't quite sure what to do with the stick of cheese, so I resorted to tiny little slices scattered over the cracker. Later that day, just as I started to process how bad the infection was, everything changed. I was told I had to move from the side room I was in to a ward with 11 other people.
Jacob, they want me to move.
My anxiety went through the roof.
First I was nervous, then anxious, then wary, then apprehensive, then kinda sleepy, then worried, and then concerned.
I want to be clear, it's not because I thought I deserved better than anyone else. I was just trying to keep my head above the water.
I feel like I'm drowning!
My face was constantly killing me. I had a terrible headache, and with the heart failure, I knew I needed as much rest and sleep as possible to recover. But my biggest fear, the thing that really terrified me, was my sleep apnea. When I sleep, it's loud, it's violent, and I gasp for breath. Usually, I have my sleep apnea machine. But my face was on fire, and my sinuses so sore.
Oh my!
There was no way I could have a mask strapped on my face or air blowing in my nose. And for me, it also blows into my eye socket, and that would have just been too much. I was terrified of being that person, the one on the ward everyone hated because I was keeping them awake. At first, they put me in the middle of the row. All eyes were on me. I felt completely exposed and very anxious. To top it off, someone in the next bed had an unexpected bowel movement.
Oh no.
and then loudly told the whole room about it. It was just too much. I couldn't cope. I staggered off the ward and into the toilets just to shut myself away. I didn't say anything to the nurses at first because I just felt like I was being awkward and ungrateful. In the end, the people visiting me helped me explain the situation and asked for the bed at the very end of the row next to the wall. Being at the end of the row meant I could pull the curtains shut without blocking anyone in. That was the only way I could cope, by shutting everything out, because it was all too much and I couldn't process it all. I didn't get any sleep that night, nothing worth mentioning anyway. I was so anxious about falling asleep and making a terrible noise, waking everyone up, that I just couldn't drift off. I passed the hours by watching things on my iPad with headphones on and the screen on its lowest brightness, so I didn't bother anyone. I must have dozed off at some point because a healthcare assistant was suddenly waking me up. They didn't say anything helpful, they just woke me up and walked away. I must have been snoring loudly, which was exactly what I was afraid of. But I was also rather upset. To be woken up and not allowed to sleep when I was in the state that I was, it made me feel awful.
I'm at the end of my rope.
I'd probably only been asleep for 10 or 15 minutes. After that, my anxiety was sky high. And to be honest, I was surprised I managed to sleep at all with all the noise that was going on. There were lots of other people snoring and coughing, breathing apparatus and machines hissing away, and flashing lights everywhere. Someone kept shouting at the nurses too, constantly asking for things and then having a go at them when they brought it, saying they didn't ask for that. I felt really bad for the nurses. What made me laugh though is they then complained it was too noisy on the ward and they were the one that was causing most of it. To make it worse, I was opposite the toilet, and every time someone went, it was like the sun was shining in your eyes. I must have been totally exhausted to have fallen asleep for those few minutes, those few precious minutes until I was woken up. In the morning, it wasn't much better. That same healthcare worker mentioned the noise to me like it was some sort of crime, and like I was doing it on purpose. I had to explain to them that I needed sleep to get well, and that I had sleep apnea, which should have been obvious. But unfortunately, I couldn't wear my mask because of my situation. They just looked at me like I was trying to be awkward. Trust me, if I could have worn it, I would have. At least I would have slept well and felt better, and not been anxious about waking anyone up. I tried my hardest not to make noise. I spent the entire night sat up in bed because I didn't dare lie down. And even if I did lie down, the pain in my face would have been too much. I was absolutely exhausted that day, and I must have fallen asleep while watching something on my iPad. I was left to sleep during the day, but I kept getting looks because I must have been making a lot of noise. There was absolutely nothing I could do about it though, and it made me feel bad. I didn't want to be the cause of annoyance for anyone. When the doctors came to see me that day, their plan was to keep monitoring my bloods and continue the antibiotics. Luckily, in each blood test, they can see my infection markers were improving, so that was a relief. They booked me an appointment with the ophthalmologist to look at my eye because it was still very inflamed. The ear, nose and throat doctors wanted to work with them to see if they thought my socket would need draining or if it would get better on its own.
That is so gross, oh my god.
When I actually had that appointment, I felt a little bit bad for the doctor. I was clearly nothing they had seen before. My case has always been pretty unique. Most doctors wouldn't have seen an eye like mine. It's quite rare to have the operation where they remove the eye and all the muscle, like I've had, and let alone have an infection that's got as bad as it had for me. To top everything off, I'd gone totally deaf in my right ear, where the infection had started. They made me an appointment to get my ears syringed and everything checked out. That wasn't a pleasant experience, and it didn't really help the deafness. I was told there was a blockage from all the swelling on the other side of the eardrum, which should drain away and clear in time. And I'm happy to say, although it did take some time, my hearing did eventually come back in that ear.
He can hear us.
Yeah, he can hear you. He can hear everything.
The second night I had another disturbed sleep. I did manage to sleep a bit better, but again during the night another member of staff woke me up by trying to move my bed twice. I guess they were just trying to be helpful because I assumed I was making noise, but all they did was wake me up and make me feel worse. The second time they tried making the back of the bed go flat, and that was the worst thing they could do. It would make me snore louder, make me cough more, and make the pain in my face even worse.
The next day I saw the doctors and there were some medical students there. One of them mentioned that my liver function tests have been getting worse as I've been in the hospital, which is not something you really want to hear. I spent a few days worrying about it, and since no one had mentioned it again, I finally asked about it. They were a little bit dismissive of me, and then said the result had gotten better, and that was all because I had a CT scan and some contrast, which if you don't know is a type of dye to help everything show up more, and that can sometimes affect the liver function tests. I wasn't to know that, and it would have been nice to have been told, because I've been worrying about it for ages. Later that day, this was my dinner and it came with a little healthy side salad. I slept better the next night apart from when people went to the toilet. And again, the sun blinded me, which was really the bathroom light, but it was quite bright. On that night, I wasn't woken up by anyone, which was nice. However, I still felt guilty in the morning and like I couldn't look at anyone because I know I must have been making quite a lot of noise in my sleep. There was, however, one funny moment during the night when someone on the ward went to the toilet and then used their phone to navigate back to their bed in the dark. When I woke up, I honestly thought E.T. was walking past the bed curtains. Take a look at this. I've forgotten to mention my absolute saviour and favourite part of the day, apart from having nice visitors. It was the tea and biscuits. Surprisingly, the tea was quite good, especially alongside the custard creams, one of my favourites. For lunch, I ordered the sweet and sour pork and a pork pie for dinner. Lunch was tasty, but the pork pie was a little bit dry and lacked flavour. And I didn't have my favourite tomato ketchup to save the day. Here's a little clip of later that night. I managed to get some more sleep, apart from when someone went to the toilet, and they decided to leave the light on and the door wide open. I was just too exhausted to get up and close it myself. Luckily, later on in the night, a nurse did, thankfully, close the door. Coming up to the end of the week and my stay in hospital, my blood results were finally improving. Unfortunately, the cannula I had in the back of my hand was trying so very hard to come loose. I asked the nurse for a bit of a bandage to help keep it in place, especially since it had been such a nightmare to get in. But the staff said they weren't allowed due to hygiene purposes, and they only really did that for people who were trying to pull them out. Their alternative was a huge amount of micropore tape, as you can see here. And since it covered the cannula just as much as a bandage and also was rather sticky, I don't really see the difference in hygiene. Oh well. Lunch that day was a rather tasty turkey roast dinner. And luckily for me, it comes with lots of gravy because I like it swimming in the stuff. And for dessert, some custard. Finally, after 5 days in hospital, the doctors told me I could go home. I was prescribed some more antibiotics to take with me so I could keep recovering and let things continue to improve. One thing that got to me a little bit during my stay, when you have heart failure and a massive infection like that, it isn't just a sinus problem, it's a whole body problem. The pressure on my eye socket was so intense, it actually opened up a small hole that wasn't there before. Look away now if you don't want to see. Here it is, and you can see from the picture it wasn't there before. I'm not entirely sure what caused it. I think it might be the optical nerve canal which they seal up when they remove the eye, but the infection made it push its way through. It did concern me for a while. I'm happy to say over time it slowly vanished, but for a while it was a strange reminder of what my body had been through. I am very, very thankful to everyone who helped me in both hospitals, so thank you very much. Leaving the hospital was just the start of the recovery process. They save your life and get you through the worst of it, and then you go home with the rest of the recovery still ahead of you. You're out of the danger zone, but you still feel rough. And sometimes going home can make me feel quite anxious. After my first big scare with my heart, I realised you often feel safer in the hospital, with all those people around you who know what they're doing to help if you need it. Sometimes when you leave hospital, you're going back to a different life than the one you had before. In the past, for me, that meant a whole new heart condition to deal with. This time, for a while, it was a strange new dip in my eye socket, and the worry that this could all happen again if I caught another cold or a sinus infection.
Oh dear.
I share all this so if any of you ever go through the same thing, you know there is help and a way through it, and still a life to be led after, even if it is slightly different. And if you're not going through anything like this, which I hope you're not, but know someone who is, maybe it helps shed a little bit of light on what it's like and might help you understand. If you've been through something similar or have your own hospital horror stories or would like to share how amazing they've been with you in the past, then let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for watching and tatty bye. Now that might sound minor. My infections were to being admitted to hospital for a week. And just to be clear, tea in my book is a meal and not a drink. That's wrong. And just to be clear, tea in my book is a drink and not a meal. That swelling you see in my eye socket had some visitors. But I had some visitors today. And in fact, throughout my day in hospital, they very kindly filled my special request of an orange. They very kindly fulfilled my special request of an orange. Dinner, also known as the evening meal. Dinner or the evening meal, also known as tea. Later that day, just as I was starting to process. Later that day, just as I started to process how bad the infection was, violent, and I gasped for breath. When I sleep, it's loud, it's violent, and to be honest, I was surprised I managed to sleep. And to be honest, I was surprised I managed to sleep at all. They booked me an appointment with the ophthalmologist and the opticians. They booked me an appointment to look. They booked me an appointment with the ophthalmologist. Hard it is to say that. What's next? The ear, nose and throat doctors wanted to work with them. I slept a little bit better the next night. The second time they tried lowering, I can't say it now. The second time they tried reclining the back of the bed to make it lower. The second time they tried making the back of the bed go flat. But for maybe it helps shed a little bit of light on what it's like.